Okay, hello and welcome to our Unity tutorial. I apologize in advance for my wonderful voice. We're going to start this level from scratch. I'm not going to try and, even though our game is called Donkey Kong Clone, we're not going to try and do that. Our kind of challenge for today was to create a third animation that we would have control of. So let's get to work on that. So here's my sprite. I've deleted all my animations. I'm going to start from scratch so you can see them all. I'm going to go to my sprite editor, and hopefully what you can see is I've got a new sprite sheet. That's why I'm starting again. And I've got my walk cycle, my trusses to walk on, and I've got another cycle here, like a jump cycle. Okay, so let's go and work this out. So there we go. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to take my mech here and drag it in, and I'm going to go window, animation, and it says, do you want to make an animation for this? And I do. And we're going to call it idle. And we've done this before, so we're going to drag single frame and we'll play our single frame. Happy days. So that's our idle cycle. I'm going to create a new clip. I'm going to call it walk, and then I'm going to drag in all of the walk sprites. And I think I may have brought in too many. Let's see what we get. Okay, that's not quite right. So let's go in and delete some of these. So I think I need to go and rename things. So this needs to go, this one, and that one, that one, that one, and that one. Okay, so now let's see our walk cycle. Okay, so that's working. But I am going to need to go in and rename some of these. So let's do that now. So sprite editor, we'll call this bar. We'll call this boss. We'll call this long bar. And you can see I've already renamed these guys. They're called J1, J2, etc. So apply that and close it. So, okay. Now we've only got. Let's go back here. We'll rename this player, and we'll open up the animation window again. Oh, animator, no, animation. You can see they're loaded in already. Those two that I've made. So let's see. I've got my walk. And I've got my idle. So I want one more, and I'm going to call it jump. And I'm going to drag here, put them in, and bring it to 12. And we'll turn on scene, press play. So that's in jumping. It's not beautiful, but it'll do. Okay. So now I've got 3 animations made, and we've got walk, jump, idle, and our controller. So we're going to put all these in here into this folder, keep it nice and neat. So let's go back to my player here, and my controller is it's got a funny name, so let's rename this. We'll call this mech control. Very good. And that's what's controlling the mech. So let's go over to our mechanism. So I've got 3 animations. Now this gets a bit more complicated than when we did it before. So I can go from idle to walk. I can go from walk back to idle. I can also go from walk to jump and I can go from jump to walk, jump to idle, and idle to jump. Now I could remove these. I could have it so that you have to be walking before you can jump, but I'd also have to change the code a bit to do that. So now we've got a few more transitions. Now we've no parameters made yet, so let's make a parameter, and let's make, I could make a series of Boolean parameters, but it might be easier to make integers, and we'll call this walk jump. So kind of a funny name, but as long as we spell it correctly in our code, it doesn't matter. And it's got a value of 0. So let's go 0, 1, 2. So here, when walk jump is less than 1, so when it's 0, so when it's less than 1, play the idle cycle. When it is less than 1, play the idle cycle. Now we want when walk jump is equal to 1, play this. Same with this one. When it is equal to 1. And then this is when it's equal to 2. And this one is when it's equal to 2. Now I've used is greater than in, but that's just for illustration purposes. So this could be equals 0. Let's do that. But you could use, any sort of terminology you want. If you were using floats, so it was decimal, greater than and less than would be more appropriate, because you may not be exactly equal to a value. Yeah. So that's the mechanism setup. And if I had a fourth one, I'd have a whole bunch more possibilities. So now let's look at the script that will control that. Player movement, and we open it up in MonoDevelop. I'm gonna try and view, zoom in, Control++. Is that what it says? We'll just keep zooming in. Zoom in. Sorry, I don't have a normal mouse to zoom in properly. I have a trackball. That'll do. So you can see that. So we've had these before. We will get to these in a minute because we're going to start firing bullets. We've got to this before, and then we've got this. Now, this was set for the Boolean parameter. So, first of all, we don't have a bool. We have an int. And it's not called walk, it's called walk jump. And we want to set it to 1. So, animator set int walk jump 1. So that's when I'm walking. Now, this is not right anymore. This should be set to 0. And then when we are, I'll get to this code in a minute, when we're jumping, we want to set it to 2. Okay, so that should make it work. So let's go file save. And now let's go back into our game. Now we have a few things to do before we can test that. I'm going to drag the code. Oh, I'm getting a... yeah, so that wasn't working. It returned an error. So I think it's in the journal. It doesn't like my Unity slang, so my console errors are gone. So I can drag and drop that onto the player, but I need to do a few more things. So I need to get the long bar. Well, need to put it in my scene. So let's put that there, and we'll give it physics 2D box collider. And now let's take my player and close these guys up, and we'll give it physics 2D box collider and also physics 2D rigid body 2D. Okay, so now let's have a look. So we go play, and hopefully we'll fall under the weight of gravity. Oh, full screen, didn't mean to do that. So space plays that animation. A, D. So the timing on that's not right, but we won't worry about that for now. So let's turn off maximize and play and turn on the animator and watch this play in the Mechanism state machine. So I'm playing idle, press the A key, let go, press the D key, and let go, press the space bar to jump, and then we go back down. So, happy days. So we've made a 3 animation state machine. So let's move on a bit. So what I want to do now is I want to make I want to fire a gun. So I've got a big mech thing here. I know it's not Donkey Kong, but this is what we're going to work on next. So I'm going to fire a gun, and I'm going to look at how I do that in my 2D game. So I'm going to go create an empty, and I'm going to call this empty firing pin. And it's going to be the place where I fire my gun from. So let's find my firing pin. So it's there in the middle. So it's got 0, 0. Okay. So then I'm going to take this firing pin, click on the move tool, and I'm going to move it in front of the sprite, roughly where the gun is. And now it's not going to animate with kind of this like pop up and down. It's just going to stay there, but I'm going to make it a child of the player. Now we're not going to do much here. We're going to press play, and in the game you can see that when the sprite's not visible, or not the sprite, the empty is not visible in the game, and empty is just a placeholder. So when I move this way, when I move that way, that the empty moves with the player. That's very important, because that's where we're going to fire from. Okay, so that's our first job, is to make an empty. I did that with game object create empty. Like I said, the empty has, as you can see over here, it has no render element, no components except a location. So it is simply a point in this instance here in 2D space. So I'm going to fire from there. So all good. Now I want to create a bullet. So let's go. Let's create a bullet in Photoshop, and I'm gonna go File, New, and we'll make it 256 by 256, and it's transparent, and we will draw something ridiculous. We'll draw a rectangle, and we'll make it black, or whatever color that is, and then we'll make some sort of ellipse. And we'll color that into, if we can. Okay. There's our bullet. It does not look very good, but that's okay. Save as. And we have to be in the assets folder. And yeah, so I'm going to call this bullet. I'm going to keep it as a PNG. That way I can retain the transparency. Save. Okay. So now, there's my bullet. Now, it's already come in as a sprite. It is only a single sprite. I don't need to do anything with it. But I want to make what's called a prefab. Now, a prefab is is an interesting object to make. A prefab is just an object that is added to the game at runtime. So it could be a non-player character, could be a bullet, could be a piece of scenery, could be a very complex thing. It could be like a character that has guns and has sub-characters for, it could be a whole very complicated thing. But it's basically a folder. So a prefab is a folder. And if you want to add something into the game at runtime, so while the game is actually happening, you want to add something in, what we normally use is a prefab. Now you could do simple things. You can have something off screen and move it on screen, so that's a way of moving things on, but the more powerful way of doing it is this way. So I'm going to create this bullet here. Now this is an empty folder. I'm going to take my sprite and bring it in here. Now it's too big, so I'll scale it down a bit, and that's big enough there. Now it's still too big, but at least we'll be able to see it in the game. Cool. Now what do I want to do with this? Well, I want to add a script to it, and I conveniently have it prepared here. So let's have a look at this. I don't know if I can zoom in anymore. I can. So there's very little to this script. Function start, yield, which is just wait for 3 seconds, destroy game object. So game object with a small g refers to the object that the script is on. So basically kill myself. And what that means is after 3 seconds the bullet will disappear. And that's very important, because we could fire thousands of bullets in a game, and we don't want the game engine to have to remember where all 1,000 are, or 2,000 or 10,000. We want, after a short amount of time, the bullets to disappear, and then the game engine no longer has to calculate their physics. So let's take the bullet and put the bullet script on it. What else do we want to do with it? Well, we want to give it a box collider. Now I'm going to edit the box collider a little bit. Make it a wee bit smaller. For now, it doesn't really matter. And we could do all sorts of other things with it, but we won't. We'll just keep it simple. So, but whatever you want to put on it, you put on it here in the hierarchy. So it's a lot like it's in the game. Then we drag it over here, and now I can delete it out of here. So you make it in the hierarchy, and then you drag and drop it into the folder, and then all of the things we put in are here. Now I haven't made it a rigid body, so I should probably do that. Don't have to, but there we go. And we could make it so it didn't respond to gravity, but we won't worry about that too much. Now finally, before we start firing bullets, I'll just save our scene. And we have another script here to look at, and we're going to make that nice and simple. So actually let's do that now. Let's set up our non-player character. So I'm going to take the boss and bring the boss in, and let's place this here. And we're going to not going to do anything with this at all except add a box collider to it. And then we're going to add this script, and we'll look at this script now. And this script says function on trigger enter 2D. If the object that hits me has the tag bullet, then destroy me. So the boss will die. But this doesn't use collision, it uses trigger. Okay, so that's interesting. You can use triggers or collisions. Triggers are normally used where there is no implication to the collision, so the collision has no real world effect. So let's say I've got an invisible box, and I walk into the invisible box, and then a door opens. So basically I reach a point in a corridor, or I reach a point in a room, and a door opens. Like a Star Trek door, slides open. There's no need for that invisible box to have any physics. So while I want there to be a collision, so I want to note that I have walked through the invisible box and something that happened, I don't need the box to tumble through the air because I've crashed into it. So a trigger is a very easy way to note a collision, but it's less processor intensive than using full collision. However, to get it to work, I need to say this here is a trigger. If I don't do that, then it won't work. However, when I click is trigger, if I had a wall here, my bullet would pass through the wall. So this no longer has physics. So has physics, will hit the wall and fall to the ground. Has no physics. But that collision, that trigger event, will be noted and then acted upon. So my boss has a script saying if something hits me with the tag bullet, then die. So let's go find the bullet and give it a tag. And I don't have a bullet tag, so I have to make one. And we'll call this bullet, B-U-L-L-E-T. Now we'll go back, and bullet. So now let's play our game and see what we get. Actually no, before we do that, we have to look at this script because I've added more things to it. Okay, and I haven't set them up yet. So bullet prefab, that's just basically the prefab. I've put the word bullet in front of it, but it doesn't mean anything. So the prefab that I'm going to use is the bullet. What is it? It's a rigid body 2D. So if I go into Unity, I look at my bullet, it's a rigid body 2D. And by stipulating that in code, I'm saying that I cannot have a bullet that isn't a rigid body 2D. So if I try to put any other object in there that doesn't have a rigid body component on it, it won't work. And then the muzzle point, that's basically our firing pin. That's where the bullet's going to appear, and it's a transform because it's a position that changes. And then the speed of the bullet. So now let's have a look at how do we fire a bullet. And again, I know you've done this with Ross, so I won't dwell on it. So we'll get rid of our debug hello. First thing to note is it's the F key is the fire key. So if get key down, fire, or F. Variable instance, so create an instance, and the instance is, or create an object, it's a rigid body. Instantiate just means add, so add into the game. The bullet prefab, now where do I add it in? Add it in at this position and this rotation. And then, so this instance of it, because I can have multiple bullets, I can have 100 bullets, so each one is an instance, each one is a version of it. The velocity of the version is the muzzle point dot up dot bullet speed. Now, that's interesting. That depends on the orientation of the empty. So what we may find is our bullets go up. So let's just see that. But before we do it, we need to look at our player script. And it says, there's no animator, there's no bullet, and there's no muzzle point. So let's give it the animator. Let's give it the... Oh, it's saying that the only thing I can put in here is the bullet prefab is the player. So we take the bullet and drag it in there, so it's the bullet. And where's the muzzle point? This is the muzzle point, firing pin. There we go. So now we've got this set up correctly. So I'll go File, Save, and play. Now let's just press F and see what we get. Okay, so we've fired our bullet. It passed through here. And that's because it's a trigger. So now let's go back to our code. Oh, no, not Photoshop, code. And have a look at this muzzle point up. So let's go muzzle point right. And if you look up here, we've got vector to that right. There you go, File, Save. And now let's press play. That's spacebar, not fire. So fire. Okay, so we saw the collision work. And what we need to do now is we need to get the fire this in on, so let's look at our firing pin. So we need to fire it on -Y. So we need to go actually, do you know what I'm just thinking? Well, that's going to take a little bit of fixing, so I'm just going to save it for now, and then I'm going to show you how to fix that in class. I'll set it as a little challenge, but it's tricky enough to fix. We need to flip the empty in the same way that we flipped the sprite. So yeah, we'll fix that in class. That's enough for now.